Day 1 of the August 98 10-day retreat in Springwater. Can we realize together that everything is happening in a vast space of listening? A listening without pressure, without expectation, without and within, being simply here with what is here, openly, awareing the sounds, the breathing, tingling throughout the organism. This hall, the people in it, the trees and the hills, permeated by silent listening. Can we realize it together this moment? There's just one listening, yet not my listening and your and their listening and his and hers, which is how we usually listen. My listening, theirs. And yet, at the bottom of it all, ground zero, there is only one listening, which is neither yours nor mine. And it reveals what is here beyond all personal coloration. What I think and what you think, what I expect and you expect, my reactions and your reactions, they're all surface bubbles. But in the depth there's just one listening, one awareing, free of personality. Can we touch that so that we can get along with each other? The surface bubbles, the surface turmoil, waves, foam, tornadoes, hurricanes, capsizing boats, drowning people. And at the bottom, one quiet listening. That's not water, that's air, but it doesn't matter. So usually on the first day of a retreat, we do talk about listening. A new kind of listening. Which means becoming more and more luminously aware of the old kind of listening. Looking at it, realizing it, pondering it. How are we listening right now? What's going on here on this seat present? How are we listening? Is it open or is it cramped and crowded and pressured? Does one feel isolated, apart, enmeshed in thoughts about myself, how good they are, how bad I am? Feelings, go with the thoughts. Evaluations of myself and others in this thought world which keeps us enclosed and separate from each other. And out of that thought and imagination world, we cannot listen to each other. We can only hear what's already preset internally in the brain and body. We expect something, we imagine something, we believe in something, and we can't hear and see what's really there in ourselves and in the so-called others. Do we get an inkling of that? How belief and prejudice and ideas about what I am and what they are keeps us in bondage, in isolation, walled in, apart from each other, who are at base one open awareing. It's there for all of us. That's our essence. And yet we don't know it because we're ensconced in our fortresses, made up of memories, desires, fears, ideas of what's going to happen to us based on what has happened to us or others. All this knowledge encrusted brain body, listening through knowledge. I'm not talking right now about technical knowledge it takes to build a bridge or build a building, send a rocket to Mars. I'm not talking about that knowledge. I'm talking about the knowledge about ourselves and each other, what we are, what we should be, what they should be or shouldn't be. What I want for myself. I know what I want, don't I? All permeated with this knowledge about what I want or crave or fear. And through that, we can't listen. We can only hear what conforms to this crust of knowledge about ourselves and each other. And yet, the crust is not completely solid. It's actually quite porous. The more porous, the more it is being awared, listened to, wondered about. Quietly, alone and together, in the midst of a humming meadow. The crust of knowledge through which we usually try to listen and can't hear. And yet, awareing it, it is not so solid. Because there's awareness, attention, call it what you will. Different words are being used because every once in a while one word will just hit one. People say, why didn't you ever use this word before? It did it. Something opened. Well, words are used all the time, but there has to be a readiness, a presence, an absence of resistance, or at least not moving totally with resistance, awareing resistance and wondering about it, stopping in the tracks to listen freshly to this, first of all, to this tightness of resistance and objection, listening to it gently, kindly. There are no enemies inside or out. There are only people and things to look at, to listen to find out about in a new way. So can there be a moment right now of no expectation? Just what's there. Not this brain work, brain body work of what should be there, of what I want to be here. Notice that. Notice the push of it, the drive, the power of the brain work to move someplace where I am not. It's all imagination. Do you see that? Imagination pushing and pulling and driving this body-mind, who at base, in its essence, is nothing but presence, here-ness, now-ness, with humming cicadas and buzzing motors and people breathing here, there, breathing. Can we listen to it? Needs to be no expectation. It's happening. What is it? What is going on right now? Nothing needs to be expected. It's all here. Is it? Is it here? Are we here? And to realize the power of wanting to be someplace else, wanting something to happen. Somebody mentioned that this morning, sort of a, how did he put it? I don't recall the words, but a sort of just a hum of anxiety. Slight vibration of anxiety, expecting something to happen. So listen to the hum. It's all here. The hum of anxiety, the hum of expectation, the hum or rumble of anger, triggered by a thought about somebody or something. Listen to it all. It's an amazing spectacle that we human beings live in, perpetuate, and react to, and are swept along with. As the crows are caw-caw-cawing. One cawing, rumbling presence, steeped in quietness and stillness at the same time. Are we together on this? We can't see and hear each other if we have images of each other, and yet images seemingly are unavoidable. They pop up. What do I know about this person? What do I remember? How is she? How was he? This is brain work which is conditioned over the millennia, the millions of years. Brain needing to work with imagery of what happened, what is likely to happen again. Can we see imagery as it happens? Not try to ignore it or deny it or fight it, but watch it quietly. The image of oneself, the image of Toni, of my neighbor, the person I room with, my family at home. It's all imagery, isn't it? Who is the real thing? Who is the real person? What's the real me? Beside all the images that so readily pop up by a very functional brain, providing pictures so it doesn't have to look all the time. So it takes a moment of quiet repose, sitting back or sitting up, whichever happens, to watch the spectacle of image making and the ready response to the image that has cropped up about him or her or me and them. To watch it all from a quiet repose. That possible? Watch reaction quietly most of the time is not possible. Reaction is reaction. Going with it, absorbed in it, captured in it. This body is so, how shall I put it? It is so palpable, so alive with pain and tension and chemical reactions, energies provoked, sadness, depression. And should it be possible in the midst of this to remain aware or to wake up in the midst of depression or anger? To wake up and, whoa, wait, stop, what's going on? A freshly found space in the midst of compression, palpitating heart, flowing juices, all going to the organs and muscles to do all kinds of inappropriate things, inappropriate because it's all elicited by imagination, by memory, by anticipation. And the body responding faithfully as though it was the real thing it is facing, as only a spectacle. A thought-made spectacle, thought, chemical-made spectacle, in which we human beings are involved to such a degree that we can hardly get along with each other. Here and there we do, but most of the time it is so difficult. At home, at work, the people we run into, and you open the newspapers or watch the news and it is one killing, bombing, shooting, poisoning. And at base we're all one openness, one silence, one presence. Can we get a feel for the urgency of touching that in the midst of turmoil, so that isolation ends at this moment of touching our common ground, with that isolation ends and love springs forth. Not thought manufactured love, but the love of being at one, present with each other. And the calling birds, and the peeping insects, the pond and the sky and the trees, and the deer and ants and skimmers. So, there's probably not a one among us, or people who do this kind of retreating, sitting, who doesn't want to touch that common essence, which is presence and love and wisdom. The wisdom of seeing what is so right now, this moment. There's no one who doesn't want to touch it, to understand it, to realize it. But not to let it become an object of the imagination again, something I want to get reaching out for. Like in this, what comes to mind right now with reaching out is this movie I saw years and years ago called Space Odyssey. And these creatures, they're always reaching out. The best symbol available to that writer was a monolith, sort of a huge monolith. That's what they were all reaching out for. Away from what? The simple, unspectacular moment of nowness. It has nothing to do with a monolith. Nothing to do with anything. It's here, it encloses and envelops everything with love and wisdom. And yet, talking about it is dangerous. Because the brain is so trained, so programmed to make something out of it and say, this is what I want, this is what I have to get. And off we go into the imaginary theater. So, need to remind ourselves and each other that this thing is not a thing of the imagination. Presence cannot be fathomed through words or pictures. It's here. It's so simple. It reveals itself when the expecting and reaching and grasping and groping comes into view, and in this exposure it fades. Can't maintain itself in the presence of awareness, the groping, the reaching, the imagining, the efforting. Let it all be exposed in this moment of quiet listening. Not to be gotten rid of or overcome, just to be seen. Not resisted, not fought, but the presence of being with what it has evoked in the body. The sensations, the tensions, the longing feeling. Listen to the longing feeling. Listen to it spaciously. The yearning for something. It's an amazing physical, mental process. This yearning for something, to be enveloped by attention, permeated in quiet awareness. Not fought, not justified, not resisted, just permeated with awareness. As it manifests right now, the longing or the fearing, I'm just picking one thing at a time. It goes for it all. The fearing, the angering. Saddening, depressing, whatever. Always moods and seasons and weathers that this body-mind changes into from one moment to the next. Let it all be felt, touched, listened to in this moment of simple presence. Also on this first day, we touch upon this whole question of authority. If you've heard it for a dozen or 100 times, beware that the mind doesn't say, this I've heard before, I don't have to listen. It happens automatically. But it's never the same what comes out. I don't know what's going to come out yet. I'm going to listen. Because that's one of those impediments to listening, thinking I already know what she's going to say. It's a certain mindset away from what's going on this moment. And it's important to talk a bit about authority. If it's important to you personally, please bring it to a meeting, group or single meeting. We all were brought up with authority. Just by the very fact of our helplessness as an infant, as a toddler, small child. We were told this and that, this you do, don't do that, with all kinds of consequences. In school, there's all kind of authority, the authority of the teachers, of the textbooks, authority of the priests, of the dogma of the church, of the imagined God or gods. Our life has been guided and laced through with authority, following it and fighting it, looking for it and resisting it, wanting it and hating it. So, can we watch it more closely as it surfaces, makes itself felt here? Making an authority out of Toni. It happens so surreptitiously, unbeknownst almost, because all of these mechanisms work automatically. So it needs a lot of attention to spot it, to track it down. This wanting to believe in what somebody says, to take it over, and so used to trusting in words, statements, as some sort of security. Again, in order not to have to look directly, which seems to be a special effort or a special energy. Not to take someone's word for it, but to look for oneself. We can take it tentatively. There wouldn't be any talks if there wasn't some helpfulness in this. Tentatively taking someone's word to it, but with the understanding that this needs to be understood by oneself directly. Repeating or remembering words is not enough. And to see when that happens, we are not so aware of that. The clarity of statements masquerades for the clarity of understanding deeply, immediately. That's why it comes as such a shock to a human being when there is a direct opening. One has sort of had the feeling one understood all along, because maybe intellectually it was clear. And then this amazing difference when there is directness of realization, in which the intellect does not participate. It may pick it up later and put it into words. So, all the things that have been said this morning, whatever we talked about, listening, isolation, difficulty of getting along with each other, none of this is meant to be authoritarian stuff to be accepted, believed in. It is an offering for all of us to look freshly every time. It's happening here all the time, looking freshly, not relying on the words that come often so facilely, but attending quietly. Maybe the words have directed one to a problem, to something that is happening. Is it really so? Is there really a sense of isolation through imagination of where I want to be, to see it, directly touch it, be in touch with it? Then there's a fresh immediacy, aliveness, which is free from doctrine, free from authority. Doesn't need to smash authority because it isn't following it in the first place. And if I listen to somebody but don't invest in it emotionally, then can I ever be disappointed, upset? I just watch what's going on. Try to verify or disverify what is being said. Maybe if we're lucky, we can talk with each other, have a dialogue together, if we're both open. That's what I invite everybody to do. If there's something in a talk that doesn't make sense, either because you see it differently, or you don't understand it, or you want to go deeper into it, please bring it up. There's a real openness here to listen freshly. I can't repeat what I said. We would have to play the tape. But we can look now. This is our capacity. All of us have that capacity to look right now, regardless of what we said or heard or remembered from before. Let's look at it now. That's what meetings are for. Not to defend something or justify something, but to freshly investigate and ask ourselves and each other to get off of the abstract level into the concrete. It's very hard. One clings to the abstractions, the words, the phrases. So when somebody in a meeting says, "What do you mean? I don't understand what you say. Say something more." That's not an attack. It's an invitation. I want to understand you. I want to understand where you're coming from. So is it possible to get off the imaginary level and enter into what's here, or what one is trying to report about what happened yesterday? And we may find in that process that we can't really look, or we haven't looked. We have only lived in the words and memories. But that it is possible for us to look right now. We just aren't used to it. We're stuck and glued to the descriptions and the explanations. And yet free to be here. This moment of fresh looking. So what is our relationship with each other? That's always the last question I raise in a first talk. How are we relating if there is not the relationship of authority? The ones in authority and the ones who have no authority. Want to get it or want to fight it. That is not the relationship here. You may see it this way, but that is an erroneous impression that needs a second look. So how are we related to each other right now, right this moment? Is there a heartful effect of affection? Friendliness, respect for each other. I will listen to what you have to say. I hope I can understand it. Try to make it simple. Is there respect for each other? Respect meaning looking again. Means for a second time. Not repetitively, freshly. Looking again at each other. Respectfully. Not going by the prejudice, the stereotype. Of course, if you're really present here together, the buzzing, the humming, the emptiness of it all, there's not even any question of relationship. We're all here in this together. We're one. Who is related to whom in listening together? This moment of freedom. We will end here for today.